Welcome to another episode of the Virteva's Let's Talk podcast, the show that analyzes the newest technologies in cloud and how to manage the use of those technologies to help your business teams be successful. On this week's episode, we're going to be talking more broadly about how AI and Copilot will affect employees across Microsoft 365, modern work, and security, and how employees and MSPs such as Virteva will adopt the technology into everyday business. My name is Scott Ledwan, and today we're joined by Chris Strong, Zach Brand, and Taylor Koken at Virteva. Taylor is an endpoint management and security expert. Zach is a champion for end user success and service delivery, and Chris leads our Microsoft practice. Before we begin, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our early listeners and remind you that liking, subscribing, and following our podcast or on our YouTube feeds is very helpful for us in helping promote the show. So if you can take a moment to do that, it would be greatly appreciated. All right. So welcome back to the podcast. How was everybody's Memorial Day weekend? What'd you guys do?
Mine was wonderful. I went camping. Nice and relaxing.
Cabin.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine was also fun. Lots of excursions with the family.
Did you do anything specific, Chris? Did you go down a waterfall like Taylor?
Nothing that exciting. No, I took the kids to the largest candy store in the state of Minnesota, though, so that was fun.
Nice.
Oh, that thing's amazing. The giant, yellow barn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Lots of exotic candy there, of all different countries, origins, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What about you,
We
Zach?
had we had a family reunion that was in down south of the Twin Cities. So we drove past it, and of course, when I asked the kids if they wanted to stop at the world's largest candy store, I got yes responses, and I think that was the highlight. When we were driving back, I asked them what their favorite part was.
Nice.
And they said the candy store.
Nice.
So you three guys actually went out and did something this weekend. I stayed home. I took care of yard work around the house. We took the dogs on a walk, and I tried walking both dogs, and I ran into a bunch of neighbors, and we were having a conversation, and one of my dog's leashes got tangled up. And I dropped the leash, and the puppy is like 8-9 months old, so I had to chase after it. And I tried to kind of step on the leash, but I missed it. So I had to do this superhero dive forward across the lawn to grab the leash. So I ended up scraping up my leg, so I stayed in, and I ended up playing the new Zelda on Switch, which was pretty fun. I've sunk quite a few hours into that. But yeah, well, good to have you guys back, Chris. Long-time visitor to the show. I'm glad to have Taylor and Zach on here. I know, Zach, you were actually featured in one of the first podcast episodes all the way back last year in June when you met with Holly. And Taylor, we had you on in the summer last year when I and Chris talked about Zero Trust in our Zero Trust Assessment Workshop. So glad to have everybody back. All right, so let's get stuff kicked off. So conversation piece today on the podcast, we're going to be talking about kind of 5 different topic areas. 3 of them I'm going to kind of pass the ball around, and we'll talk a little bit about modern workplace, how Copilot's going to affect security, and how it's going to affect kind of end users, how AI will affect managed services. And then we've got a couple more kind of speculative questions that we'll talk about around cost. We talked a little bit about this last week, and we still don't have a great answer on it, but we're going to speculate a little bit about that and kind of how to get the best return on investment if you do adopt. And then one thing that we didn't talk about last week when we talked about SharePoint was what the early adopter experience is going to be like. And I think that one's going to be pretty interesting, because for the folks out there that are in it right now, there's, I think, 5 to 10 different groups private testing, and Microsoft's opening up to 500 additional testers essentially in that paid beta. It'll be interesting to kind of hear what that feedback is and if there is any NDA on that content for those beta testers. But we'll get back to that towards the end of the show. So to kick things off, Zach, you're our modern workplace service desk service delivery specialist at Virteva. I wanted to kind of talk or hand the ball over to you and talk about where do you see Copilot and just general AI affecting kind of the modern workspace apps? So the Words, the Excels, the PowerPoints, Teams, Outlook, etc. Where do you think that's going to be useful for folks when they are able to adopt? And what are some common scenarios where you think it'll be used?
Yeah, thanks, Scott. It's a good question. When I look at AI and use it myself, read a lot about the content, at least I'm hoping that it ends up being a bridge for some of the users that know what they want, but they don't know how to get what they want, or they don't know how to create what they want, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So someone that's not a power user in Excel, or is not, a wizard in PowerPoint. A lot of my peers and a lot that I see is, people using like Designer if they're trying to use their own, PowerPoint template or trying to make a deck or something like that that isn't like a corporate design deck. A lot of people are using Designer to help them get what they need a little bit faster. And I think it's going to do that, but you know, I think times 10, times
And
100.
by
I think
designer,
the
you mean the design feature in PowerPoint, not Microsoft Designer, which is a whole new product that's also actually in beta right now.
Yes, that's what I mean. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I guess that's what I'm hoping for, is that it's a bridge that can bring typical end users that may not be, power users or technologists necessarily.
Hmm.
It can actually enable them to help them create and collaborate in a way that they haven't been able to before. So I think that would be pretty special in my opinion. And then some other use cases too, being close to the service desk for many years, we, work with a lot of support cases. And I think that there have been some AI chat technologies that have come out that have been pretty interesting, but have typically needed to skew towards the larger enterprise. And really, some of the mid markets, there isn't the scale to automate some of those types of things. Where if you look at the ROI analysis on, trying to automate, if you're in 1,000 contacts or less a month, it gets really expensive and it just doesn't really make sense, which is, typically why we haven't seen a lot of automation in that area.
Hmm.
But hopefully that brings more automation opportunities with the technology, of course. We see a lot of onboarding of employees. So that could be anywhere between the, automation of accounts and access. That could be helping provide end user experience support. So this could actually relieve pressure on HR teams to work with employees and deliver a great first day experience. We have the pleasure of working with a lot of customers that are fast growing. And I know that there's immense pressure on some of those teams from a scheduling perspective, shipping sometimes dozens, even over 50 different, devices and users and accounts, and have these training classes all coordinated at the same time. That's just an immense amount of pressure and scheduling effort to do that. So if there's use cases where those teams can be relieved in some capacity so that people can onboard for the first time, can ask kind of company specific questions based on, policies and procedures and guidelines, that hopefully that some of these teams can be relieved. And then if I can add on maybe another piece is, specifically more for larger teams, is, some sort of capacity to help with performance management.
Hmm.
So this would kind of help with the manager employee one-on-one conversation, that given some of the different performance attributes that some organizations could have, whether it's, productivity numbers or sales numbers, or, retail could be, revenue, all the different metrics that different segments of industries have, to help different organizations with performance management, whether it's at kind of a individual, store or warehouse, or production line level, or whether it's kind of a one-on-one, manager employee relationship.
Hmm.
That's kind of an interesting concept that I haven't seen talked about too much, but I think once we get our arms around this a little bit more, hopefully there's some creative uses for that.
I think knowledge management is one that's probably going to go a little overlooked too. Is being able to just open up a Word document and have a template already for your knowledge base template, and just use Copilot to say
Hmm.
how would I fix this problem in Microsoft Office or Microsoft Word. And I don't think that it's necessarily going to be able to produce the best on point result if it's just scouring the web, but the big thing that they've been talking about over the last week or so since build is the ability to adopt plugins and adapt plugins and just drop those right into different applications is being able to say that, hey, I want to look specifically at Microsoft support articles and then see if it could write you a quick knowledge base article for that stuff. And it's probably not going to be perfect, but it gets you 80% of the way there, and then your team kind of steps in and does that last 20% on it.
And I think that's a good just overview of the technology as far as what I've seen when I've asked it questions or wanted to use it productively for something, is it generally speaking gets me 80% of the way. So, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Zach. So next question I have is around moving away from workplace and moving a little bit more into kind of that Microsoft 365 security. And we saw at the Secure conference that Microsoft had a couple of months ago, they introduced Security Copilot, which is a take on the modern workplace pilot, or Copilot rather. Interested to hear, Taylor, someone like you that works in endpoints and security every day on the M365 world, what was your honest kind of take on when you first saw it versus maybe what it's kind of developing into, and now that you've had more time to think about it? Like, what do you see not only Copilot, the Security Copilot, doing to help cybersecurity professionals, but also where do you see where AI might help kind of revolutionize that security kind of like that security kind of mindset on not only being able to hunt for things, but also to resolve them quicker?
Yeah, so I think from a high level, what I see in the ability for AI, at least right now, is sort of what Zach said about people know what they want, but they don't know how to get there. And I think that's one of the biggest hurdles to, especially new organizations we work with, when they first start off with a Microsoft 365 security stack. They're sort of like swimming in an ocean of new technologies, new ways to view certain incidents, respond to phishing emails, get the indicators of compromise for a certain incident, etc. And I think AI in general is going to help kind of collect all that information into one area for them. And that's kind of where Security Copilot comes in. So from what I've seen so far, when it first started, I didn't honestly know a whole lot about it. I was like, it's probably going to be just like an open AI thing where you enter in a question and it pops up something. The biggest thing that I was worried about was going to be the security repercussions of its access into your environment. But they've kind of since released some more information about that, about how you actually get to it, etc. So I don't necessarily see it being a huge problem. But what I'm excited for is, even with just AI right now, one of the problems we have, and internally we have what I think there's something like 400, 500 Microsoft Sentinel Analytics rules that we have to parse through today, and we have to go through and we have to create a knowledge article on that, where this is how you handle it if this happens, right? This is how you handle it if this happens, and hopefully Security Copilot can be a replacement for that, where we can just ask the analyst can just ask Security Copilot, please review this incident for me, do this, this, and that. It should be able to pull in the information from different sources. Over the years, Microsoft has gotten better with that security.microsoft.com as sort of being the home base for all of the Defender stuff. Now, pretty much everything is in there. I mean, they're even forwarding the Azure identity protection alerts over into security.microsoft.com, which is wonderful. So hopefully, with all that being more integrated, Security Copilot can sort of do the same, right? I would like to see with incident response exact steps of, here's where you should go. Here's the URL you need to go to. Here's the indicator of compromise we found. Here's the hash of the file, whatever it may be, would be listed in there, rather than, for somebody looking at a security incident for the first time, especially going to a knowledge article that has, I think the one we were working on was like 60 some pages by the time we were done with it. That can take a super long time to parse through. So that's kind of where I'm most excited, honestly, is that incident response and sort of taken those silos of information and putting them into one spot so that people who aren't very familiar with the tools can use them better.
Yep.
Kind of the secondary piece that I've found really interesting is their threat hunting section. So if you go onto like their security copilot page right now, they talk about how you can use it for threat hunting, right? So now the barrier of entry for advanced threat hunting in security.microsoft is you got to know KQL, right? It's not the most complicated thing in the world, but you have to know how to do it, especially when the queries start to get more complicated and such. So hopefully with Copilot, it'll be easier where we can just say like, how many emails that users have clicked on have this as the URL that they clicked, and hopefully it'll be able to pull up those emails and you can go and open that. That's my dream anyways, because then I can just use English instead of KQL in a lot of scenarios.
Yep.
So that'll save me and I'm sure everybody else time.
Yeah, I've had conversations with some of our EUC team members too about using it to kind of drop into like kind of like that LLM, that large language model is, oh, how do I write this into a PowerShell script, and it'll do that for you, and it'll generally do it fairly well. But it comes back to that old security kind of saying is trust but verify. Like you don't want to just run something that the AI wrote you because you don't know for sure. So you kind of want to look. I think that there was actually something in the news recently about a lawyer that used OpenAI's chat tool to write like a brief, and it cited a bunch of fake cases. And when the guy went to verify it, he never actually verified on the individual sites. He just said, can you verify me that this is true? And it pointed him at like LexisNexis, but then he never actually went to LexisNexis to verify if it was a real thing. So I think with AI in general, and we'll get a little bit more to this as we get to the speculation section, is that's what a lot of this is going to be. Is we've already heard that it's spitting out a lot of false information and it's not completely tuned yet. And kind of even going back to the security copilot thing, is semantic search is probably going to be huge here, maybe even bigger than it is for the modern workplace applications. And we talked about this last week on the show, but semantic search basically takes a look at what you're dumping into it, and then it verifies it up against a number of different things to make sure that it's providing you the best possible search answer, rather than you saying, what does an elephant look like? And it sends you back a picture of a dog named Elephant, right? But yeah, the security. Yeah, go ahead.
I like that story.
That's pretty good.
I think that the security piece of it, when they first announced it, I wasn't as hyped on it as I was with Modern Workplace. And I think that my love is generally Modern Workplace, how it interacts with the end users, how it interacts with the support teams, and then the endpoint management side of it. That's the stuff that I love in Microsoft, and that's the stuff that I love in IT. I was a little bit more kind of on the fence about the security copilot, but I think that as we're learning more and starting to think more about the implications of how you can use it to be more effective and to cut down on the amount of man hours that you'll spend working on a security incident, is I think that it's going to be a pretty sweet feature. We just, again, kind of have to wait for it to get here, hit preview so we can play with it and understand what the cost is going to be.
Yeah, I like the idea of lowering the barrier of entry, especially given the talent in the cybersecurity space. While growing, it still seems like there's more open seats than there are qualified candidates. So hopefully that can be a great solution for many different organizations
I think
in the future.
I think a very interesting part on that, Zach, too, and I'm glad you brought it up, is we keep hearing about how there's there's millions and millions of open security seats right now. What does that look like in 5 to 10 years once AI has had a chance to actually insert itself a little bit more? Do we see that number go down because a lot of companies start shifting that way? We've heard about companies, not necessarily locally in like the Minneapolis area, but just within the states, that are starting to look at AI as opportunities to kind of scale down call centers, scale down different. What was the one that was in the news the other day, Chris? I think it was like the mental health organization that was scaling back on costs because the employees wanted to unionize. And I mean, that's just some of the things that AI is going to kind of start to I don't necessarily want to say help tackle,
Isn't it,
because I think that that's kind of crappy that that's happening to that organization, but it is one of the areas where AI can help, but it's going to take a while to probably be able to get there and be as good as one of those specialized individuals are in specific industries. All right.
Yeah, the only
You go ahead.
element that I think also, in the same vein that Zach and subsequently you, Scott, were getting into is just that efficiency factor. In light of the fact that there is a shortage of qualified security engineers and personnel, if AI can make each individual that is in a seat that much more efficient and able to scale up their, utilization of these tools in an effective way, it's having a similar effect, right? In doing more with less. And that seems to be kind of the theme anyway, in many categories, but certainly in an AI context, wherever a single individual can produce scalably more output than they were able to before by virtue of, it's not a mistake Microsoft's calling at least the M365 security and some of these other AI, OpenAI infusions of LLM Copilot, because they're not intending it to replace the human.
Mm-hmm.
They're intending it to supplement and enhance the human, and serve in that Copilot capacity where it's aiding, enhancing, supplementing, and guiding that individual to be able to move faster, better, more volume, whatever the case may be, without necessarily replacing them.
Yep.
So we'll see. I mean, obviously that'll evolve over the years, but I think they have the right idea in that find a way to make the humans more efficient and more effective.
Yeah. And I imagine every single person that's on this call right now at some point has used either OpenAI's chatbot or the new Bing bot to kind of help with that a little bit in one way, shape, or form. I mean, in the old days, I feel like the IT folks are always the ones that are able to type the right phrasing or the right type of question into Google to find what you were looking for, whereas somebody else that's a little bit less not as illiterate with technology isn't going to be able to figure that out as easily. The people that are really going to thrive in this new Copilot world are going to be the ones that understand how to interact with the AI chatbot the right way. I think it was either Elon Musk or the CEO of NVIDIA said the other day that you need to learn how to use it or you're going to get left behind. And I agree with it. I think that everyone is going to need to not necessarily need to know how to code or be like an AI expert, but you're going to need to know how to talk to these chatbots in order to get the right information out of them. But again, you're also going to have to understand when you ask it a question, you're going to have to understand that you may not always get back the correct answer, and you're going to have to verify that. Over time, I see that as a problem that'll go away to a degree, but then you start to kind of fall into the disinformation campaigns of, well, if no one's really checking it anymore, we can just feed it whatever we want. So we're just going to need to be diligent about making sure that we understand how we're working with AI and how AI is working with us. All right, next question. Chris, we'll shoot this one over to you. So the question is, how do you think end users are going to be affected by AI? And how do you think that managed service providers like us at Virteva are going to be able to help with that?
Yeah, so to take a step back, and this is almost a handy segue from what we were just talking about. In essence, everyone's going to be affected by it. It doesn't really matter who they are or what their role is in any given company or in their personal life. It's going to touch some aspect of their day-to-day. And so how will they be affected? Well, they're going to be affected first and foremost. How will they be affected will depend on what they're trying to accomplish in the moment and how AI comes into play in either enhancing, as we were saying, or influencing that. More broadly, I think there's been to even take a further step back, there's been a lot of analogies lately bandied about by different individuals, certainly the CEOs of the respective companies like Microsoft and Google and Sam Altman from OpenAI, comparing AI's impact or impending impact to things like the introduction of the personal computer, the introduction of the automobile, the introduction of the mouse, for example. And they're not entirely wrong. I think sometimes those are difficult analogies to bring that ratio of 1-to-1 comparison to, but they are accurate, I would argue, in the sense that just like when those types of revolutionary paradigms came into play, it wasn't perfect out of the gate. There was immaturity in the sense that, it's easy to take for granted today, but in 1978, for example, you could plop somebody in front of a personal computer in the very earliest ones, and they wouldn't know what to do with that thing. I mean, it was very rudimentary, the capability of the machine, but then also the user's understanding and ability to effectively leverage that device in a way that was going to make meaningful difference in their life. And I honestly think AI is going to be similar. It's not going to be this out of the gate, okay, AI is out, everyone's just cooking. It's going to be a learning process that takes years and probably decades of the humans adapting and the humans at various degrees of success learning how to embed AI into the way that they do things. Some will be better at it than others. There's race car drivers that are really good at driving, and then there's some people that are not so great at driving, and everything in between. And AI is going to be one of those things too, I think, where some people become very effective in how to leverage it really usefully, and others that will struggle. And again, all those spectrums in between those two ends. And so it's likely going to be this very motley array of outcomes and experiences. And frankly, that, to transition into the managed services provider aspect, I think that's where companies will benefit from having providers that can meet those users in all those different circumstances that they're going to find themselves, where there's not an obvious answer. There's a user that's trying to accomplish something that, yeah, if they were to spend hours or days understanding how AI would have been able to help them accomplish that, that's not going to necessarily be readily available to them to just on the fly pick up. Or they may not realize, hey, if I just asked the question a different way, maybe I would get a different answer. I've already seen that just in the way, if you watch videos on YouTube and stuff of people interacting with ChatGPT, there's a pretty wildly variant response depending on the different parameters a person enters, where they ask a basic question, but then they can answer or ask the same questions in a second prompt with a bunch of additional explicit instruction that says, oh, and you're not allowed to speculate, and you have to cite your sources, and you have to, couch it in a Shakespearean prose or whatever you want to do. Like, the AI responds very differently depending on the structure of that query and the level of detail. And those are all going to be skills that the people that use this stuff will have various levels of aptitude in doing. And then simultaneously, they're going to be trying new things with it and not really sure yet how to interact with that AI in a way that's going to be conducive to the outcome that they're looking for. And therefore, you have managed services providers that can make sure that at least they have that support in place to be able to call somebody to say, well, let's ask the people that are a little bit more effective at this, just like in any technology context. Maybe they can help me do a better query. Maybe they can help me understand why this isn't producing the output that I thought it would. Or maybe it's giving me more than I asked for. How do I prevent it from doing that? Maybe in some cases. And so it's going to be really fascinating to see what that journey looks like. But then again, like Taylor was saying, from a security context, like Zach was saying, in a approach to Microsoft 365 in the modern work context in a very specific way, I think it's that much more practical for companies to have outside help in the form of a managed services provider that knows what they're talking about, knows what they're doing, to help manifest the security around this, the operationalization of AI in an effective way, that scalability of the support mechanism behind it, so that when, not if, but when these users ultimately encounter this in their day-to-day, they're not left to have to just with that 1978 machine where they go, I don't know what you want me to do. What's this mouse thing? I'm supposed to move my hand and it moves. That's all weird to me. It's going to feel that way for everyone for a while. And then combine that with the AI's pace of change and adaptation and innovation in itself, compounding that challenge. It's really going to be, that much more effective for managed services providers to add value and to be there to scale alongside those companies as their users are, faced with these things.
Yeah, good parallels there too. So most of us on this call are probably closer to the age of 40. But our fathers growing up, they had the encyclopedic knowledge of, hey, how do I fix this? And they had like 60 different books in the basement on plumbing and electric and all that stuff. And then it kind of moved more to the YouTube-ish model where you look something up online and you watch a couple of videos to show you how to do it. Yeah, you're going to be able to get some help from that, but you're not going to be able to have AI build you a plane. Like, it's just not going to happen. And please don't do that. Someone actually in my area, I saw a news report over the weekend, crashed a homebrew experimental plane. and there was some fatalities involved. It was like 2 people, but
So
yeah,
I know this is going to be in complete digression, but digital twins make that a little bit of a different equation. So that's a whole other podcast we could do someday.
All right. Well, we don't necessarily need to go any further on this, but just AI is going to be able to help you with a lot of stuff, but it's not going to be able to help you with everything. There's still going to be specialized folks like us and other managed service providers that can do that. We even talked about that a little bit last week as we were talking about kind of the Copilot and SharePoint aspects is, yeah, it can build you a site, but it can't necessarily build you probably specific workflows without there being a man in the middle helping manage them. All right. Thanks, Chris. So last couple of questions up here are going to be the speculative ones. So we've been kind of talking about what Microsoft's put in front of us so far and our kind of takes on that and where it's going to go. But I really want to kind of talk about the things that we haven't heard. So we don't know anything about release yet. We don't know anything about costs yet. And we don't necessarily know, because we don't have those things, where the actual return on investment is going to come from. So I'll kind of start this one. The tea leaves and what I've been kind of looking at in the community makes me think that, and we talked about it at the top of the show, is there's only like 5 to 10 different businesses that are testing this right now in that private preview. Microsoft does have plans, and again, they haven't said when yet, but I'm speculating that probably around August, September, after Inspire, we'll see some more people enter into the testing phase. Microsoft opened it up for 500 companies. You could sign up on the website. There was a cost associated with it as well, but they haven't actually told us what that cost would be either. My initial thought is they are introducing more people into that model so that they can feed more data to the program to actually kind of start weeding out more of the bad answers in building on that language model. But from a cost perspective is, if you have an E3 or an E5 today, I don't necessarily think that it's going to be included, especially when you're talking about the graph having access to your enterprise data, and that's where it's pulling the answers from. Microsoft also announced that Copilot is coming to Windows 11 next month in June, for those of you listening to the podcast a little bit later. And I think that that'll be interesting as well. And I think that that also kind of goes to so they've made it more openly available in the Edge browser for everyone. You can now, even if you're not using a Microsoft account, you can ask it questions now. With them adding it to Windows 11 in the next month or so, I think that that is also just kind of helping feed the model to improve on the answers that are coming out of it. But in terms of cost, I can't really say. I just know that it probably won't be included, at least at the enterprise level. With your E3 or E5, it'll probably be a bolt-on. Teams Premium is $7 a month right now, though in July that'll be changing to $10 a month. I don't think that it would be crazy to say that this could cost an extra $5 to $10 a month per user, though they may come in a little bit lower on that because they want to get more people onboarded into it, and then maybe they raise the price after they see that it's been effective, or they tie it to a certain SKU in your enterprise agreement. But I think that basically what I'm saying from a price perspective is don't expect it to be free. There's an AI arms race going on right now between Microsoft and Google. So if it is free, it's probably going to be free for the first year just to onboard more people into it, to keep more people away from Bard. As far as when, I think that we could see a public preview in Q4. But that's my kind of take on it right now, at least from that question. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think there's some things that we can infer at least. I count me in the camp where I have very little confidence that they're going to make it free. I think there inevitably will be a cost, mostly for the reason, and the inference I'm getting at is there's a lot of infrastructure behind supporting or proffering AI. There's a lot of data center footprint. Maybe, of course, it's not ours. I mean, it's a cloud service, but for Microsoft and for Google, it certainly is.
Yeah, and they're buying up chips from NVIDIA too, like crazy right now. They've got that partnership with them, and they're also in the process of developing their own silicon.
Right, and so it's because of that, along with some of the other realities around licensing, I think it's an inevitability that there'll be a seat-based licensing model associated, at least with the Microsoft side of it. And it would not surprise me if Google does something similar. where yes, you have OpenAI service in Azure that's a little more pay as you go and more consumption based, but in the Copilot context, I think they have to make it a seat based model just to break even, if not make a little money long term on the amount of infrastructure the horsepower that has to go into get proffering that service to those users. So it's just like anything. Some users will use it more than others. And so some users, maybe they lose money on, while others there's high margins because some use it less or just use it in ways that aren't as taxing on that infrastructure. But ultimately, yeah, I would not be surprised at all if it's something like $10 per user per month for M365 Copilot, with another add-on cost for the security Copilot, another for Dynamics, another for, et cetera, et cetera.
I think it'll be interesting too to see if they just end up including Teams Premium in with that if you end up buying into it, just due to the fact that a lot of the same stuff that's happening in Teams Premium that we've been shown is a lot of the same stuff happening in Copilot. And I almost wonder if the introduction of Teams Premium back in December last year for the masses that you could sign into was to kind of start seeing what the interest was going to be in some of those features. Very exciting, though. Intelligent recap coming sometime within like the next handful of days. It's not in my license yet, but soon I'm going to get a recap on this entire Teams meeting, and I wouldn't have even had to be here. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Taylor.
I just wanted to jump in on the cost piece. I think, part of like OpenAI and, kind of being the front runner right now on, you go to chat.openai.com when you want to ask ChatGPT something, right? So I think it'll be really interesting to see how Microsoft handles this. Same with Google too. I hope it's not cost prohibitive like we've seen some of the really kind of, what I'm trying to compliance manager. If you want like a custom assessment, years ago, it was like $5,000 a month, and now it's like 500. So I get like kind of an inkling that Microsoft is going to start that route and be like, if you want to use Security Copilot, it's going to be, $80 per user per month or whatever. And then over time, they'll kind of like drop it down. I hope they don't do that, because I think it would be a mistake on their end. Because, I don't know, these Copilot, security or otherwise, is one of those tools that I think just gets better the more people they have in the environment that uses it, gets smarter. So
yeah, and good call out too. Looking at like kind of like licensing models, like you have to assume that Security Copilot is a separate license than just the Modern Workplace Pilot, right?
Right. Yeah, I would have to think so. Like, there's been talk for a while about the E7 license coming out eventually. So, I wouldn't be surprised with, AI and a couple of the other things they've announced, that there'd be something like an E7 that would include some of those things, but we'll see.
If you want to get on the speculation side too, it wouldn't be the first time if they were doing it this way, where we've seen companies put out a lot of the information, but then deliberately avoid acknowledging any sort of cost or even the structure, because they don't know themselves, and they're hoping that through the public discourse, it reveals the comfortability that the public will have. They can collect data about all these speculative discussions happening, and they can read from that, okay, what do we think we can get away with? What do we think the market will bear based on what all these speculations are leading, because there's podcasts that'll come out like this. There's articles written by the media, and there's comments and there's feedback, and Microsoft hears that stuff. Yep. And it would not surprise me at all if they're trying to kind of keep their ear to the ground a little bit to say, okay, when people toss around terms like $10 per user per month for Modern Work Copilot, are they getting a negative reaction to that? Are they getting a positive reaction? Are people nodding, going, yeah, I could see that? That all is data.
I think that $10 a user per month is too high. I'm going to say that right now. Everyone say $10 a user per month is too high.
I was going to say, if all four of us whisper 1 cent per user per month for the next 5 minutes, does that?
And I mean, out of Bill last week too, like, I think that we could do an entire podcast just on talking about the use of plugins and how those are going to interact with the tool. There will most likely be a cost to some of those plugins after a certain period of time as well. Like, they demoed kind of just basic solutions like, oh, I'm going to go on to Bing or Sydney and I'm going to say that I need a head of lettuce, and that's going to pipe out to Instacart, and it's going to pop the page right up and let me click the checkout button. That's fantastic, but there's got to be some back-end infrastructure to that has to get paid for somehow, right? Like we can't just keep adding more and more stuff to these huge data centers and expect the cost not to go up, right? It's using more electric, it's using more power, it's using more programmers to actually program that code. So, yep, there's going to be a cost to it. Chris, do you agree with me? Q4 probably makes sense for public preview.
Yeah, certainly for a preview of some kind that's more openly accessible to all. I agree. Yep.
Okay. All right. Last question, and then we'll close out here. Again, another question from the group, totally speculative. I'd like to hear from everyone. I kind of took a very long take at the beginning of the last one, so I'll reserve my feedback until the end here because I think that we're going to talk about a lot of it. But what do you think that the early adopter experience is going to be like for these teams that are in there right now? So there's the 5 or 10 big companies in there, and then another 500. We talk about it going into public preview in the fall. What do you think that that's going to be like right now? Like we've heard plenty about just using the Bing tool in OpenAI, that you're not always getting a great answer out of it, and we've seen people find ways to kind of like get this thing a little unhinged at times. What do you think that that's going to be like in like the Office products or in the security products once we kind of roll it out?
I'm gonna say, like, for early adopters, probably it's just bad. Like it's or a learning experience, I should say. Bad for the people who have to try and help end users correct problems that they've created themselves by trying to find their own solutions or find their own things in O365 or whatever it may be. I think that while the knowledge that the Copilot is going to give people is going to be great, I think how they use it is going to be more of the problem than anything. Mm-hmm. So that's going to be the bigger leap organizations are going to have to make, rather than I think controlling or deploying Copilot around.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there's some aspects of what Microsoft's going to have to do to maybe reformulate the UI in some of the more obvious places, like the M365 apps themselves, maybe things like SharePoint and Teams, to make it more obvious that it's all of a sudden there. Mm-hmm. Because people get stuck in habits. Like we all have ways we've done things for years and years. I don't think just because they drop AI into this stuff that we magically just go, oh, and now we know we're just going to do it this way. Like they're going to have to almost force people to be aware through UI prompts or other integrations to say you need to really strongly consider trying this. One thing that does strike me as a little, to further agree with Taylor, if you look at the demos they've done so far, they're never live demos, at least that I've seen or come across. They're very curated, very carefully constructed video clips of like 30 to 45 seconds that, I dropped this file into the chat and it converts it to a SharePoint site, but they never let you see what's in that file. So how much prep went into making sure that file had the exact structure, format, content, whatever, so that it creates a very magical, nice demo versus the crap that we often sling around in these documents. And how well is the AI going to be able to still be useful and meaningful and saving time rather than just giving me a new mess that I get to now spend a bunch of time tweaking and curating from there. So yeah, it's almost inevitably, like Taylor is acknowledging, probably going to be a little rough. Now as they get more time and more horsepower, more data, now they can't, or at least they've said they won't collect our personal data, that it'll stay on our tenant from a data, like a company data standpoint, which is its own kind of thing that they'll have to make sure they reassure everyone. But it's going to be a very long-term evolution where I doubt anyone is just going to be going, yep, that's just my day-to-day now. I use AI for this, that, and the other. It's going to be little gradual bites over the course of years, probably.
So, Chris, real quick, just circling back on your first point, are you advocating for the return of Clippy?
I mean, some form of that. In an unironic way, they could probably do it in an effective way. But they're going to have some prompting facilitator like that. I just don't think that people are going to go out of their way to discover it unless it's, especially the less tech savvy people. I mean, there's going to be some of us that just want to play with it and we seek it out. Mm-hmm. But I would argue that's the vast minority of those that will be using this stuff, and the rest are going to have to be kind of forced upon them.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
in
as
the
I pull up
demos
a
that I've seen
chat,
so far, like there is definitely a Copilot button, but it's up there in the ribbon, and it is. I don't necessarily remember if it's on the home button of the ribbon, but I agree they are going to have to make it a little bit more in your face. I just don't hope that they don't do what they did with Edge and make it a giant Bing button at the top right corner of the screen. That was really obnoxious for the first couple of weeks that it was out. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Zach.
oh no, I was just gonna hop on by just saying, as I look at one of my team's threads, I've got like a dozen icons underneath the type of message bar, and if they just stuff it in there with some of the other ones, it's just gonna get a little lost.
What they did with Microsoft Loop, and Loop hasn't
Yeah,
really caught
Loop is
on,
in there.
probably because of it.
Yeah.
Well, and that's where I know their vision is, and why I think Satya used the mouse comparison, because it's, if we think of it in the traditional sense right now, like, oh well, I'm going to have this extra button that I click, or I have this extra slide out thing that comes in, it'll never succeed in the way that they hope. The only way AI takes on the transformational nature that they're trying to make it is if it changes the way we actually interact on these machines entirely. And I think that's where things like speech and text, just typing, are where they're going to have to infuse that AI, so that as a user, I get comfortable with the idea that I just want to do something, like the Windows 11 stuff that they were talking about last week. Where once I said, okay, if I want to go to a software update, I do Windows key I, then I go to Windows software update, and then I go, like, that's just muscle memory and knowing where to go. I'm clicking into things, I'm hitting hotkeys. You got to eliminate all that and be able to just type in there, I just want to do this thing, and then be able to trust that the AI will get me to where I want to go in the way that, once I would have used a mouse and a keyboard to get to, now that level of interaction change, I think, is the only way they're going to really be successful. Where, we've always laughed about like speech to text in the sense that I talk into my computer, and how that would be ridiculous in an office where everyone's just basically shouting at their computers to do stuff. But I think somewhere in between is the reality of how people evolved in interacting on machines like PCs and phones and all that, and start to adapt to the idea that I don't need to remember this, or have a button or a series of buttons in a ribbon, or file menus, or all this other stuff. It's all under the hood. That's all below the waterline stuff. I just tell this thing what I want, and it produces the results.
Yep.
That's the level that they're going to have to build up to.
I think ultimately, too, the one that wins this AI kind of like Copilot assistant arms race is going to be the one that can actually take what they've learned and infuse it into like a mobile assistant, like an Alexa or a Google. I don't necessarily know if Siri is going to compete with that, because I think she's kind of at the bottom of the barrel right now. But being able to see Cortana pop back up and have that power, even if they want to rename it Sydney, will be great. I think that the thing that they just need to be a little careful about is, for those of you that play games, is the whole Cortana going rampant thing in like the end of the Halo trilogy. We don't need that in our AI assistants. So please avoid that at all costs. It'd be much appreciated by the human race. Okay, so I think that wraps our discussion today. Again, a pleasure having you all on the podcast this week. Hopefully, we'll see you again in the future. We are going to take a break next week from podcasts, but I expect that we'll be back talking within the next week or two about our recent new Microsoft accreditation for security. Planning on having Todd from our EUC team on the call. For more information on the slew of recent Copilot and AI announcements from Microsoft, you can visit Microsoft's blog or listen in on some of our more recent shows. As always, if you have any questions or need help with implementing any of these features, you can contact Virteva. We are a leading IT managed service provider and can help you with all your IT needs. You can email us at letstalk@virteva.com or visit our website at www.virteva.com. Thank you again for listening, and for all of our subscribers joining the Let's Talk podcast. Please don't forget to hit those like, subscribe buttons, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks all. Bye.
Searching for an IT consulting partner that provides 24/7 end-user support, Microsoft Cloud solutions, security tools, and network management? Get to know Virteva. Our high-touch, white-glove customer experience helps businesses like yours that want next-generation technology under a managed services model. Get predictable and consistent IT support at a predictable cost. With an expert team of professionals and a strong commitment to customer satisfaction, Virteva is well equipped to take your business to the next level in today's rapidly changing digital landscape. Learn more at Virteva.com.